Welcome to Global Draft, where history, geography, and the hidden stories of our world come together. Here, we don't just look at maps, we explore decisions that changed nations, ideas that challenged power, and choices that reshaped the future. Across the world, borders are drawn not only by rivers and mountains, but by fear, ambition, and the promise of protection. For centuries, armies have been seen as the backbone of a nation, symbols of sovereignty, deterrence, and survival. From ancient empires to modern superpowers, military strength has often defined global influence. But today's story asks a surprising question. Can a country survive without an army? In a world where defense budgets reach trillions, where headlines are shaped by conflict, and where security is measured in missiles and manpower, a few nations chose a radically different path. No standing soldiers, no tanks guarding capital cities, no fighter jets patrolling the skies. Yet these countries continue to function. They govern effectively, their economies grow, their people live in relative stability and safety. How is this possible? The answer lies not just in geography or alliances, but in how these countries are governed. Without armies, power does not rest with generals. Instead, authority flows through civilian institutions, constitutional law, and democratic oversight. Police forces replace soldiers, courts replace commanders. Elected governments, not military leaders, hold control over national security. Budgets that might have been spent on weapons are redirected toward education, healthcare, infrastructure, and public welfare. Security becomes a matter of social stability, trust in institutions, and international cooperation rather than force. But this approach is not accidental. Each of these countries made a conscious political choice to remove military power from governance. And that decision reshaped everything: how laws are enforced, how borders are protected, and how citizens relate to their government. In this visually immersive documentary, we explore 3 real countries that live without a standing army. Costa Rica, a nation that constitutionally abolished its military and invested in people instead of power. Iceland, an island state that relies on geography, diplomacy, and alliances rather than soldiers. And Panama, a country that removed its army after decades of military rule and rebuilt its democracy under civilian control. We'll explore their history to understand why these decisions were made, their geography, to see how location shapes security, their governments, to learn how authority functions without military influence, and their people, whose lives reflect the impact of these choices. We'll also examine the risks. Living without an army does not mean living without threats. Crime, tension, and instability still exist. These nations challenge a deeply rooted assumption that strength must come from force. Stability can be built through institutions. Their stories suggest that stability can be built through institutions, cooperation, and vision. This is not a story about idealism. It is a story about governance, trade-offs, and real-world consequences. So as we begin this journey, keep one thought in mind. If armies are not the only path to security, what truly makes a nation strong? Let's begin.
Costa Rica's decision to live without an army did not emerge from idealism alone. It grew from history, geography, and a deep understanding of its own society. Unlike much of Latin America, Costa Rica never developed large colonial plantations or powerful aristocracies. The land was rugged, the gold scarce, and survival depended on small-scale farming and cooperation. This created a population that valued shared labor, local decision-making, and relative equality. By the mid-20th century, Costa Rica had already developed a strong tradition of civilian governance. But in 1948, a disputed presidential election triggered a brief yet intense civil war. Though the conflict lasted only weeks, it forced the nation to confront a critical question. What kind of country did it want to become? The answer was radical. In 1949, under President José Figueres Ferrer, Costa Rica abolished its military entirely. Barracks were converted into museums and schools. Military budgets were redirected toward education and healthcare. This shift was more than administrative. It became the foundation for Costa Rica's peaceful identity. Geographically, Costa Rica lies between Nicaragua and Panama, with coastlines on both the Pacific and Caribbean. Its terrain includes volcanic mountain ranges, rainforests, fertile valleys, and long coastlines. While this location could be seen as vulnerable, it also reduced the likelihood of invasion due to difficult terrain. Costa Rica proves that peace can be intentional policy, supported by governance, education, and trust. Maritime patrols are designed for public safety, not warfare, and operate under strict legal oversight. No generals hold power. No coups have occurred since the army was abolished. Authority flows through democratic institutions. Costa Rica consistently ranks high in social development. Education receives a significant portion of the national budget. Public health care is widely accessible, and universities are the pride of the nation. Economically, Costa Rica shifted toward ecotourism, sustainable agriculture, and technology services. Stability, peace, and predictability attracted foreign investment and fueled innovation. The people, known as Ticos, often describe their national identity with the phrase "pura vida." It reflects a cultural emphasis on balance, well-being, and optimism. Living without an army does not eliminate challenges. Organized crime and trafficking are addressed through policing. The country addresses these through intelligence cooperation and international partnerships, not militarization. Costa Rica proves that peace can be intentional policy, supported by governance, education, and trust. A nation defined not by its military strength, but by its spirit, heritage, and its choice for peace. Iceland's defense story is written by nature. Located in the North Atlantic Ocean, Iceland is shaped by glaciers, volcanoes, lava plains, and long winters. The island has no land borders and lies far from major population centers. For centuries, isolation itself served as protection. Iceland was settled in the late 9th century by Norse explorers who brought a culture of lawmaking and community governance. One of the world's oldest parliaments, the Althing, was established in 930 AD, long before modern armies or nation-states. This tradition of civilian rule remains central to Icelandic identity. Iceland has never maintained a standing army. Instead, national security is handled by a small but highly capable Coast Guard, responsible for maritime patrols, airspace surveillance, and search and rescue operations. There are no combat divisions, no tanks, and no compulsory military service. Government authority is firmly civilian. Iceland operates as a parliamentary democracy with strong institutions, independent courts, and transparent governance. Defense decisions are made by elected officials, not military leaders. Iceland protects itself through alliances. It is a founding member of NATO, relying on collective defense agreements. Allied forces assist with air policing and surveillance missions when necessary. Economically, Iceland focused on sectors aligned with geography: fishing, geothermal energy, hydropower, tourism, and innovation. The absence of military expenditure allowed sustained investment in infrastructure and social welfare. Icelandic society places high value on social trust, education, and equality. With a small population, governance emphasizes consensus and transparency rather than force. Modern challenges are emerging. Arctic routes gain strategic importance, and global tensions rise. Iceland responds not with militarization, but with monitoring systems, diplomacy, and international cooperation. Iceland demonstrates how geography, governance, and partnerships can replace traditional military structures. Panama's experience with military power is not just history, it is a warning. Throughout much of the 20th century, Panama's armed forces became deeply embedded in politics. What began as a national guard gradually evolved into a dominant political force. Military leaders influenced elections, controlled institutions, and shaped national decisions behind closed doors. By the mid-20th century, Panama's armed forces became deeply embedded in politics. What began as a national guard gradually evolved into a dominant political force. Civil liberties weakened. Public trust eroded. The military was no longer just protecting the state, it was controlling it. Then came 1989. The United States launched an invasion that removed Noriega from power. The operation was swift but disruptive. When the dust settled, Panama stood at a crossroads. The country faced a defining question. Should military power ever again shape its future? The answer was decisive. In 1990, Panama formally abolished its army. Soon after, this was written into the Constitution. The era of military rule ended not just politically, but structurally. Security responsibilities shifted to civilian-led institutions. Barracks were converted into museums and schools. Military budgets were redirected toward education and healthcare. The National Police, Border Services, and maritime authorities were designed for public safety and law enforcement, not warfare. This transformation was especially striking given Panama's geography. Panama is a narrow land bridge connecting North and South America. At its narrowest point, it stretches just over 60 kilometers from coast to coast. It controls one of the most vital trade arteries on Earth. The Panama Canal, completed in 1914, the canal reshaped global trade by connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. For decades, it was administered by the United States before full control was transferred to Panama in 1999. Today, thousands of ships pass through its locks each year, carrying goods that fuel global economies. Instead of guarding this strategic asset with tanks and soldiers, Panama relies on international treaties and economic integration. The canal itself is operated by a civilian authority, symbolizing a shift from military dominance to technocratic governance. Government authority now flows fully through democratic institutions. Panama operates as a presidential republic. Civilian oversight ensures that security forces remain accountable to the Constitution. Panama redirected its focus toward economic growth. Panama City transformed into a financial and logistics hub. Skyscrapers rose along the Pacific coastline. International banks established headquarters. Free trade zones expanded, particularly in Cologne. Ports modernized. Infrastructure improved. The country leveraged its geographic advantage, not through force, but through commerce. The people of Panama reflect this transition. Urban professionals, canal engineers, dock workers, and entrepreneurs all participate. Public life feels more open. Elections are competitive. Civil society organizations operate freely. Yet challenges remain. Panama's position as a transit corridor makes it vulnerable to organized crime and drug trafficking networks. But these threats are addressed through policing, intelligence sharing, and international partnerships, not through re-establishing an army. Panama's decision to demilitarize was born from experience, from witnessing how concentrated armed power can distort democracy. Today, the canal stands not as a military stronghold, but as a symbol of global connection. Institutional stability is the new foundation. Security does not always require soldiers. Sometimes it requires accountability. Sometimes it requires the courage to permanently close the barracks. Costa Rica, Iceland, and Panama chose different paths, but reached the same conclusion: strength does not always come from force. If this story made you think differently, leave a comment below. like the video, and subscribe to Global Draft for more cinematic global stories.